Thank you, Father Vincent. I have not come actually to reconcile between Eastern and Western because of such, as you know, not much conversant I am in the Eastern side. All that I did is during these 10-15 minutes, I added the subtitle and that is failing to recognize the field hospital we live. Students, at the end of it, I have got actually 10 quotes. If you can remember at least 7 quotes, then you will get distinction. Hermeneutics leading to praxis. If you have learned some German, you can try to read it, but it is from the famous quote of Marx. Philosophers have interpreted the word, but the point is to change it. That's the starting point. And this, comes from his book, The Thesis on Spoiled One. The second quote or the second philosopher I just want to bring in is, who he is, Albert Camus. And his insight, though a little pessimistic, there is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and this is suicide. Of course, it comes from this book, The Myth of Sisyphus, and I'm sure you will get a chance to read the book. Camus suggests that suicide amounts to a confession that life is meaningless, the feeling of absurdity which we collectively feel. So face to face with the meaninglessness of existence, what keeps us from committing suicide individually or collectively? And he says, the life instinct is much more than the reasons for suicide. And again he says, Camus says, we get into the habit of living before acquiring the habit of thinking. And by thinking here I mean philosophizing and also interpreting. But Camus says, most of the time, our life is an act of eluding. We escape ourselves into our own world, delusory imagination. Although we create some hope for ourselves, most of them are illusion. So we try to put off facing the consequences of the absurdity of life and try to create somehow meaning out of our own meaninglessness. Ricker, I just want to focus on his critical hermeneutics. In critical hermeneutics, meaning construction can be understood as an interpretive act. So the hermeneutic interpreter, any reader or any actor, is creating another text on a text, and this recursive creation is potentially infinite. We can have infinite interpretations, consequences. Every meaning is constructed, even though the very constructive act of seeking to deconstruct and the process whereby that textual interpretation occurs must be self-critically reflected upon. So Ricker is emphasizing the need for criticism, self-criticism. Again, critical hermeneutics does emphasize the fact that the whole of social reality, our life itself, is historically constituted, culturally conditioned. And in such a case, the researcher, the reader, does not merely accept the self-understanding of participants, but seeks to critically evaluate the totality of understandings in a given situation. Thus, he analyzes their own understandings historically, culturally, and in terms of the changing social structures of we are all part. So, the hermeneutic dialectic perspective is an integrative approach. It emphasizes both the subjective meanings for individual actors and the social structures which condition the meanings and also makes the meanings significance possible. But in an ideal reading in interpreting hermeneutical situation, there is no precise emphasis on winning the debate. There we are collectively engaged, and even if my arguments turn out to be wrong, I am willing to learn. And what matters is actually a collective engagement. If I discover that my objections are more reasonable or the others' objections are more reasonable, then since it is a collective engagement, since it is a reasoning process, we stand to gain, because at the end, collectively we gain new insights. So, in the larger context of inquiry and discovery, allowing the power of argument to sway over myself along with others, that should be the aim of a Socratic method of an integrative hermeneutics. Now, a sketchy brief of Gadamer. This is all from his quote from one of the books. Gadamer says, the hermeneutics that I characterize as philosopher is not introduced as a new procedure or procedure of interpretation. Basically, it only describes what always happens when an interpretation is convincing and successful. It always harvests a broadened and deepened self-understanding. But that means, this is the key, hermeneutics is philosophy, and as philosophy, it's a practical philosophy. Gadamer, more on practical philosophy. The great tradition of practical philosophy lives on in a hermeneutics that becomes aware of its own philosophical implications. So we have recourse to this tradition about which we have spoken of earlier. It's a quote. In both cases, we have the same mutual implications between theoretical interest and practical actions. Aristotle brought this issue through with complete lucidity in this ethics. For one to dedicate one's life to theoretical interest presupposes the virtue of phronesis. This in no way restricts the primacy of theory or of interest, so theory and interest in the pure desire to know. The idea of theory is and remains the exclusion of every interest in mere utility, whether on the part of the individual, the group, or the society as a whole. On the other hand, the primacy of practice is undeniable. Aristotle was insightful enough to acknowledge the reciprocity between theory and practice, but the primacy of reason goes to the praxis. It goes on. Hermeneutics has to do with the theoretical attitude towards the practice of interpretation. The practice of interpretation, that's the key. The interpretation of text, but also in relation to the experiences interpreting them, and in our communicatively unfolded orientations of the world. This theoretic stance only makes us aware reflectively of what is performatively at play at the practical experience of understanding. Thus, we can say. So, when I speak about hermeneutics, it is theory. There are no practical situations of understanding that I am trying to resolve by so speaking. This is when hermeneutics becomes a theory in itself. The whole thing is taken from this book, Reason in the Age of Science, and finally the two sentences. The connection between the universal desire to know and the concrete practical discernment is a reciprocal one. So it appears to me, heightened theoretical awareness is about the experience of understanding and the practice of understanding, like philosophical hermeneutics and one's own self-understanding. They are inseparable. Now, another case is Pope Francis Field Hospital analogy. All of us are aware of his statement, and he urges the priests in the seminarians that they should be willing to make a mess of their own situation. And this is the key that I want to focus on. And he says, in that famous interview, which I'm sure most of you have read, I'll be speaking of it in the next slide. I see the church as a field hospital after battle. And no doctor is going to be fussing about the patient's cholesterol or blood sugar levels. He is going to be treating major wounds and trying desperately to. This interview was given, in this journal, Civil Catholica, and the whole interview consists of something like 20,000 words. And the interview was published in 16 journals from different countries. Now, how do this statement of the Pope, how are they interpreted by various American newspapers? First, one Sarafia history professor says, people have been wounded in a war over secularization. And therefore, the Pope is saying, let's look after the wounds. That's more important than winning the war. New York Times initially said, Pope bluntly forced churches focus on gays and abortion. USA Today, a popular newspaper, Pope seeks less focus on abortion, gays and contraception. And CBS, Pope Francis, Catholic Church must focus beyond small-minded groups. New York Times later, Pope criticizing narrow focus calls for church as home for all. So these are all the interpretations, and my feel is that even the interpretations have been reduced to a very, very religious or even Catholic domain. Back to Marx. Marx has said another statement, this all of us know. Different translations of the same. And the context in which he wrote, religion is the sigh of a oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, just as it is the spirit of a spiritless situation, it is the opium of the people. Now, this is a contentious issue that I am going to take up. My feel is what Marx has said about religion, I am just bracketing it out. My contention would be, collectively as a society, the whole society will live in the same critique of Karl Marx. This means most of the people vaguely are aware of the fact that given our lifestyle, given the way we go on, we are unconsciously but collectively leading ourselves either to a slow or a sudden collective suicide. Our lifestyle as it is being lived out is not viable. Ted Shadad had said, human beings are evolution, become conscious of itself. He said it about 60 years ago. Today, given our technological advancement, we can very well say we human beings are those who are either able to enhance life or we can also eliminate totally human life and life itself. The tipping point, it seems, has already come. Can we turn back, make our life again viable, or are we living in our own illusion? Camus, are we collectively in an act of eluding, postponing our real issues? Here comes the boiling frog dilemma. This is not exactly a biological experiment, but what some of the scientists do claim, they claim it more as a metaphor. If you keep a frog in a water, it's fine. If you normally increase the temperature of the water, it will surely jump out. It will escape. But according to this so-called metaphor, if you gradually, very gradually increase the temperature of water, the frog will get used to it It will initially, like that heat, gradually, if you keep on increasing, it will not jump out. It will gradually learn to like the higher and higher temperature till it dies off the extreme heat. The question is, confronted with the possibility of our own collective suicide, is it not the task of us thinkers, communitarians, to become aware of our situation realistically? We do know that philosophy hermeneutics has a significant role to play. All the forces in the world are not so powerful as an idea whose time has come. Still, we are living in a world of sterile interpretations. Philosophy, including hermeneutics, may be in danger of becoming an opium for the masses. In this context, can we commit ourselves creatively to further life? Optimistically and realistically, can we learn to live with one another? Can we keep this learning to live with one another as the basic focus of all our philosophies, all our religions, all our ideologies? Our life is limited. Still, as human beings, we need to get involved in it. So the 10 goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kuru. Now, house is open. So, questions, clarifications?
Thank you very much for this approach, very pragmatic. But it sounds to me still unduly critical of what we do here in Cambridge. I was very impressed certainly with the metaphor of the boiling frog, or the frog in boiling water. Well, I was just wondering, what is putting us now, in our time, in boiling water? I don't think it is philosophy. It is not hermeneutics. It is not culture. Perhaps in some places, like in some parts of India and the other parts of the world, it might be religion badly interpreted. But it is not the discussion, it's not the dialogue about ideas, it's not the debate. But it's a technology and an economy that got loose of ideas, of ethical paradigms, of a deeper sense of responsibility, of an interest in interpretation in hermeneutics. The global warming is a consequence of a capitalist system and a technology that is running amok without any sense of limit. So I think, with Tully appreciation, that it might be a bit dangerous for a philosopher to be that harsh on philosophy, or for a religious person to be that harsh on religion. Because if there is perhaps any hope left that we don't boil down in boiling water that is surrounding us, for example, boiling water of violence, very serious issue, I think to sorry, this is not the right word, but pushing down the value, the importance, the necessity, the vital necessity of ideas, of serious conversations, of hermeneutics, of interpretation, might be a very dangerous thing to do. What do you think about that?
Thank you. You have actually understood me perfectly. But one particular point I want to say, when I used opium of the people, I did not limit to philosophy. If you notice, I brought in the word culture. The whole culture that we are living in is part of it. All the reasons you give, environmental, economic, hunger, and all those reasons definitely are valid. But my question is, if we believe that philosophy is the first science, I do believe that philosophers have got not only a role to respond to this larger crisis to play, and to the extent we do not respond to this role, we are also part of the problem. See, I am not saying it is just the philosophy, the very philosophy in itself per se, that's the opium. It's the collective culture that we are living in. That is, so to say, become the opium, including Marx's own Marxism. Are we not in a position as philosophers, as thinkers, to open our eyes and to collectively search for solutions, but at an emergency level? I do agree. One of the slides you remember, I did not even read it. Theory has got a very, very significant role. The most practical thing is a good theory. You remember, one of the slides that has got a very significant role. But my problem is, in spite of all the theory that we are privileged to have, why is it that the same practice goes on?
Kuru, thank you very much for a very, very interesting approach to the whole idea of hermeneutics and praxis. My question, can a text anytime have a meaning without a hermeneutic reading? I give an example. Now we take the whole Indian morality, like what we today claim to have the constitutional morality was a general Indian. But what is the real mind we have is more of the Manusmritic morality, our approach to the world and other things. Another example I can easily give is the whole idea of Islam. Islam, where there is very little space for interpretation, very little space for understanding.